What's up, beautiful people? I hope you're doing well out there today. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are, however you are, I hope this message finds you at the right time. So, last video, we were talking about 5D and how to navigate 4D obstacles and how to remain in that frequency because we all shift. We all, fall short at times. That's just the part of being a human. Anyways, so this video, we're going to expand a little bit more on that, but on the positive side. And then I'm going to break down a little bit more of how these three dimensions interact with each other and how you are already operating in these spaces. You just aren't fully aware of it yet. So last time we were talking about shame and blame, and these things are fourth dimensional. They're in the mind, right? Anytime we're talking about meaning, the meaning of certain things, we're talking about 4D and 5D stuff. Anytime we're talking about the actual physical aspect of this thing, right? We're talking about 3D, right? This gentleman right here is running, right? Him actually running, him actually feeling the exertion of his energy. That's the 3D playing out. Earlier, before he ran, he had a 4D experience of him planning yesterday or earlier in the day that he's going to go run, right? That he's going to exercise. So a lot of that stuff happens, a lot of these things in these dimensions happens in that same way. It's happening up here and then it comes down to here, right? The spirit and the mind, and then it plays out here, right? We're not just autonomous robots who don't think about what we're gonna do, but we actually plan, we have feelings, all sorts, everything. There's a whole process, right? So this whole process is playing out in these different dimensional aspects of yourself. Now, those pitfalls that I was talking about, they're in the 4D, in that planning side of it, right? And that's where a lot of people deal with things. Say people that have a hard time exercising or staying fit, it happens in that 4D state. It's not in the state of them exercising. A lot of it's already mental, right? A lot of the workout beforehand, laying it out, yeah, people can play it out and say, hey, I'm going to do this tomorrow. But when it comes to the actual effort of it, that's where the 3D comes in, right? And that's where your chakras and all this stuff kind of play out, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, this is just kind of helping you to understand the scope of what we're doing and how we're doing, and how different aspects of ourselves are already interacting with one another. So when it comes to shame and blame and negative aspects of that same tool as being used to plan out, hey, I'm going to go exercise. Hey, I'm going to cook this food, right? Based off of this recipe or whatever. That same tool that we have in our mind is also the same tool that has kind of been programmed to use against ourselves, right? That's why a lot of the stuff is happening here. A lot of the tension, a lot of the anger and stuff that you feel, that people feel, whatever, it happens here, So, understanding shame and blame, those are things that have gone back way built into religion, way built into a number of things, to where we are the ones carrying that blame, right? Even though we might be pointing at somebody else, it's really happening internally with us, right? That's why casting the first stone, right? And the same thing with blame. It's like it's all shame. It's all happening in here, right? We don't need somebody else to put you down. Once you are dwelling in that energy of shame, it's really stemming from here. It's really all in here. And a lot of times us as humans, we kind of fluctuate in these different states and different aspects of it and so forth. When ultimately, on a higher level, we're beyond all of this stuff. And a lot of times, a lot of belief systems are rooted in the mental space and not fully up here in the spiritual five-dimensional space, because there are nuances and differences between these spaces, and a lot of people may not understand. Yes, people may understand that we are a spiritual being in a physical vessel. However, we are also a spiritual being operating a mental vessel as well. And a lot of people don't understand the difference between the mind and the spirit. A lot of times people are putting these in the same category when they're meditating and so forth, because they're using the same tool of them planning out to be spiritual, when that's not how this thing works. That's why there's a clash between science and religion, right? They're all just idea frameworks, belief systems, ultimately. One is more rooted in the 3D. One might be a little bit more rooted in the 5D. However, the 5D does not need to be measured. It is immeasurable, right? So like trying to create, you know what, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but that could be a whole different video. So tapping back into shame and blame. Essentially, on the positive side, blame would be forgiveness. Shame would be self-respect and self-love. And that is a lot of what we here on the third have to implement and integrate, right? Forgiveness being, you know, proactive forgiveness, which is grace, right? Which is giving people the room to make mistakes, giving people the room to feel comfortable that if they don't do something perfectly, it's not going to hurt the relationship. It's not going to hurt how they think you might view them, right? Grace goes such a long way in this world, but a lot of times we don't give people grace. A lot of times, if anything, we're assuming that they're already going to do something wrong. We're assuming that they're already guilty to some degree because of prejudice or because of our own stuff in here, when really, you know, grace is what we give to plants to allow them to grow, right? You can't just force a plant to grow. Once you plant it in the seed, yeah, you can give it water, you can give it sunlight, you can give it the proper nurture and care that it needs, but you know, you can't squeeze it to make it grow faster. You got to have grace for the process, right? Right, there's no blame to be here, right? It's really just caring. Same thing with shame, you know, self-respect. A lot of us as humans, a lot of our self-respect and our dignity has been kind of stripped from us and programmed out of us in a lot of ways, to where we are being more so designed to worship something outside of us. I'm not saying God, I'm just saying celebrity worship, you know, superior worship, you know. There's a lot of things and a lot of systems that are more designed for people to always be under somebody else, right? And to not have their power, and to always, you know, want to appeal to somebody else's liking. And a lot of that is not even necessary. A lot of that is kind of an ego trip that we go on, and a lot of that stems from childhood, right? Wanting to be accepted, wanting to, you know, be, just wanting to be accepted, you know, so to speak. But for me, I'll just go off on a quick tangent about myself. My thing was being understood, and I would get frustrated from being misunderstood. And, you know, until recently, I finally gave up surrendered that aspect of myself that really wanted to be understood, because I felt like I have so many cool things in my head, I know so much, and I want to share it, and I feel like I can articulate it enough to be shared. But still, that's not enough. Still, you know, with the universe, it's taught me this lesson. And then it didn't teach it to me because I was like, I learned one day, because I'm an awesome person. I learned, you know, from being disappointed, and from understanding that a lot of that disappointment came from my own expectations of wanting to be understood. But I will say, the happy ending to that is that from surrendering that understanding, or that wanting to be understood, here, I get more of it from here. Because when you're operating more in this realm, a lot of people in the 3D are not going to understand as much, you know? They're going to want to question it until it's no longer sacred. They're going to want to measure it. They're going to want to, you know what I mean? And God works in mysterious ways, you know? And mystery is not about being understood. So, you know, it's cool being on this side of things. Now, let's get back to what we were talking about as far as the structure of 5D, 4D, and 3D. 4D being the mental plane and the bridge between these two. And I would look at it in the same way that people look at the 3 states of matter. Well, there's more than 3, obviously, but the states of matter being solid, liquid, and gaseous, right? And so here on the third, we can liken this to solid, right? Nothing two objects can't be in the same place at the same time, right? Two physical solid objects, right? The mental being more like liquid, and the spirit being more like gaseous, right? And so it's still the same thing, but in a different state, right? The solid form, ice, right? You get two ice blocks and you're trying to push them together, they're gonna break, right? If you get liquid like water, you mix it together, hey, that blends a lot easier, right? Still the same thing, just a different state. So it's easier for ice to look at another block of ice and be like, oh, we're different, we're separate, you know? But when it comes to the mental space, these things aren't so separate, right? A lot of times when people are fed stimulus or stimuli or whatever, a lot of times people's minds go to the same places, right? Like, if I say macaroni and cheese, I think most of us are gonna think about the same kind of visual, right? It's not like y'all are gonna start thinking about, you know, like a turkey leg. You're gonna actually think it's Thanksgiving. But at the same time, like, you get what I'm saying. Like, in the mental space, we're all so much more connected, right? When you look at a crowd cheering, right? Or in a game when somebody makes a big goal, everybody's like, ah, right? A lot of people, we are innately the same, right? In the minds. We are all a lot of times seeing the same thing, right? You see a video on the internet and a lot of people are thinking the same thing, right? In the comment section, people are commenting off of the same kind of jokes. We're all picking from the same, like fish picking from a big ball of, I don't know, food or whatever, like you see on the Discovery Channel. Anyways, I don't care. But anyways, as humans, our minds do that. Our minds operate in the same way to where it's like schools of fish. You can see how people's minds operate, especially in a mass group. Now on the spirit, it's even greater than that. There's even more connection. And that's where these principles exist. These principles exist in the five and they play out down here in the third. They play out in all of them, but they play out here in the third. It's more, you can feel it more physically, right? There's certain principles about integrity, about certain things that you can't actually grab physically, but they exist as kind of guidelines from the higher dimensions, and they still exist down here because the higher dimensions, they, like I mentioned before in the last video, they require less energy to actually transfer information, right? Like here, I need to eat every day. I need to grow up. I need to do a lot of stuff in order for me to make this video, right? There's a lot of energy that needs to be transferred. But in the spirit, all that doesn't need to be possible, right? I can exist. I can just exist. So what I'm saying is that these lower dimensions, they give form to the higher dimensions, right? We can imagine what a bird would look like in the spirit realm because we have experienced it here on the physical realm first, right? But if we're talking about a thing that is infinite, the spirit realm, which is infinite, right? There's a difference in energetic transfer in that kind of state. It's not going to be so much in the spirit realm. Everything needs to eat each other to survive, and we still need to go to the restroom, and we still need to sleep and do all these things that are required for a physical vessel. So we are taught to be afraid of other states of consciousness and awareness, right? Whether it's, you know, through drugs or whatever. Like, obviously that's just the gateway to a lot of stuff. But ultimately, I'm talking about death and passing on and our mortality as humans. When really, you know, this thing is just like training wheels. Your brain is like operating almost in both realms, right? Your mind, your fourth dimensional, is operating like a conduit between these realms. The physical realm, being able to take these memories and be able to visualize and be able to understand what's what and ground yourself in awareness, conscious awareness. And then the higher planes, we're starting to understand and learn more about unity. We're starting to understand about higher principles, why certain things are good, why certain things are bad, you know, or can stifle our progress, right? Why it is better to interact with people in a way that's not going, like, let's say, like, it helps you to be more mindful of the delicate nature of our existence and how interconnected everything is.